Her best friend wrote a book. A character in it was based on her. Personality, appearance, life events. All recognizable. The character had a love interest, based on their mutual friend Riley. In the book, the characters end up together. In real life, she and Riley had never dated, never even considered it. But now everyone who read the book assumed they were secretly in love. And she hadn't warned anyone it was fiction. People started asking questions, friends, family, co-workers who'd read the book. So are you and Riley together now? When did that happen? How long have you been hiding this? She kept explaining it was fiction, just characters, not real. But the questions didn't stop. Riley started getting uncomfortable. Their friend group got weird. And now Cass is furious, says she should have warned people the character was based on her so they wouldn't assume the romance was real too. But she'd never agreed to be a disclaimer. This isn't a story about a book. It's about what happens when someone uses your life as material without considering the consequences, and then blames you for not managing those consequences. When being recognizable in someone's fiction creates assumptions about your real life, and you're expected to preemptively explain what's real and what's not. And when the author's creative freedom becomes your social problem to solve. It's about the blurred line between inspiration and invasion, and who's responsible when that line causes damage. She has a best friend, Cass. They've known each other since college. Cass is an author, has published several books, does well enough that writing is her career. Cass pulls from real life, always has. Little pieces of the people she loves show up in her characters. A personality quirk here, a physical description there, a memorable moment repurposed as backstory, normal writer stuff, inspiration drawn from real experiences and relationships. Everyone in their friend group knows this. It's part of who Cass is. They've all seen bits of themselves in her work. Usually it's subtle enough that only people who know them well would recognize it. Usually it's flattering, a small way of being immortalized in something creative. But Cass's most recent book was different. One of the main characters was heavily based on her. Not just inspired by, based on. The character had her personality, her appearance, specific life events that had happened to her. Enough detail that anyone who knew her would recognize it immediately. There was also a love interest in the book, a character heavily based on Riley, another friend from their college group. Same thing. Personality, appearance, recognizable details. In the book, these two characters fall in love, have a whole romantic arc, end up together. In real life, she and Riley had never dated, never hooked up, never had any romantic connection whatsoever. They were friends. That's it. The idea of them together had never even been a conversation. She knew the characters were based on them. Cass had told her while writing, asked if she was okay with it. She'd said yes. It was fiction. She trusted Cass. Didn't think it would be a problem. She didn't warn anyone. Didn't preface the book with, "Hey, that character is me, but the relationship isn't real." Didn't post on social media clarifying that fiction is fiction. It seemed unnecessary. Obvious. The book came out. People started reading it. And the questions started almost immediately. So are you and Riley together now? Wait, when did you two start dating? How long have you been hiding this? I always thought you two would be cute together. Friends, family, co-workers who'd picked up the book because they knew she was friends with the author. People kept asking, kept assuming the romance in the book reflected reality. She explained every time. It's fiction. The characters are inspired by us, but the relationship isn't real. Riley and I are just friends. Most people accepted it. Some seemed skeptical. A few made comments like, "Sure if you say so," with a knowing look, like she was being coy, like the book had revealed a secret she was still trying to keep. It was awkward, annoying, but manageable. Then Riley started getting the same questions, and he wasn't handling it well. He's more private, less comfortable with attention. The constant inquiries about a relationship that didn't exist were making him uncomfortable. Their friend group started acting weird, making jokes about her and Riley, teasing them when they talked to each other, creating an awkwardness that hadn't existed before. The book had changed the dynamic. She told Cass about it, said the assumptions were getting uncomfortable, that maybe for future books with recognizable characters, there should be some kind of disclaimer. Cass got defensive, said it was fiction, that people should understand the difference between inspiration and reality, that she shouldn't have to explain her creative process to readers. But then Cass turned it around, said she should have warned people, that if she knew the character was based on her, she should have told friends and family proactively so they wouldn't make assumptions, that it was her responsibility to manage the confusion because she was the one who was recognizable. Here's what was actually happening. Cass wanted the freedom to use real people as character inspiration without dealing with any social consequences of that choice. She wanted to write recognizable characters, recognizable enough that people who knew them would see the connection and think it was cool, but didn't want to be responsible for the assumptions that recognition created. When those assumptions became uncomfortable, she redirected responsibility, made it about her friend not warning people, not disclaiming, not managing the fallout of being used as material. But she hadn't asked to be used that way. Yes, she'd said it was okay when Cass asked, but that permission was for the character existing, not for managing every social interaction that resulted from that character being recognizable. Cass had made a creative choice, to base characters heavily on real people, to put them in a romantic storyline that didn't reflect reality, to publish it knowing people would recognize the inspiration. Those were all Cass's choices, and the consequences of those choices, the confusion, the assumptions, the awkwardness, were Cass's responsibility, not hers. If Cass wanted to avoid confusion, she could have made the characters less recognizable, changed more details, fictionalized them further, or she could have included an author's note clarifying that while characters were inspired by real people, relationships were entirely fictional. But she didn't want to do that. She wanted recognizable characters because recognition creates connection for readers, makes the story feel more real, more grounded. She wanted the benefits of using real people without the complications. And when complications arose, she made them someone else's problem. The situation got worse. Riley started pulling back, stopped responding to group chat messages as quickly, declined a few hangouts. The assumptions about their relationship, assumptions he'd never asked for, were affecting his actual friendships. She talked to him about it. He wasn't angry at her, but he was frustrated. Said he wished Cass had changed the details more, that having people constantly ask about a fake relationship was exhausting. She went back to Cass, said this was becoming a real problem, that Riley was uncomfortable, that their friend group dynamics were shifting. Cass said she was overreacting, that it would blow over, that people would stop asking eventually, that both of them were being too sensitive about something that should be flattering. But it wasn't flattering. It was invasive. Having strangers and acquaintances make assumptions about your romantic life based on a book you didn't write is invasive. She asked Cass to post something, a clarification on social media, an author's note in future editions, something that would help stop the questions. Cass refused, said it would be bad for the book to point out which parts were real and which weren't, that it would break the immersion for readers, that as an author, she needed to protect the story. So protecting the story mattered more than protecting the real people who'd been used to create it. Cass's friend group has fractured over this. Some people side with her, say Cass should have been more careful about making characters too recognizable if she didn't want to deal with confusion. That authors have a responsibility to consider the impact on real people when they use them as inspiration. Others side with Cass, say she's just doing her job as a writer, that everyone knew she pulled from real life, that her friend should have anticipated this and managed it proactively. A few people think both of them are wrong, that she shouldn't have agreed to the character in the first place if she wasn't willing to deal with people recognizing her. and that Cass shouldn't have made the characters so identifiable if she wasn't willing to clarify what was fiction. She and Cass aren't as close anymore. There's distance, resentment on both sides. Cass feels unsupported, thinks her best friend should be proud to be in her work, not complaining about minor social awkwardness. She feels used, like she gave permission for one thing and got something else, like her life became material without her fully understanding what that would mean. Riley has completely pulled back from the friend group. He's still friendly, but keeps his distance. The whole situation made him uncomfortable in a way that can't be undone. Some readers of the book have found her on social media, direct messaged her asking about Riley, about the real story behind the book. She's had to block several people, has considered making her accounts private. The book did well. Cass is working on a sequel. She hasn't asked for permission to include similar characters again, probably because she knows the answer would be no. This story is about the cost of being someone's muse, about what happens when inspiration crosses into exploitation, and the person being inspired from is expected to manage the fallout without complaint. Writers use real life. That's normal, expected, part of the creative process. But there's a difference between drawing inspiration and creating such direct parallels that readers assume the fiction is autobiography. Cass crossed that line, made characters recognizable enough that people who read the book immediately asked about the real-life versions, then acted like the confusion was someone else's responsibility to manage. The permission she asked for was vague. Can I base a character on you? What does that mean? How recognizable? In what context? With what fictional elements added? Those details matter, and they weren't discussed. She said yes, thinking it would be like Cass's other books, subtle inspiration, a character trait or two. Not a detailed recreation of her personality, appearance, and life events placed in a romance she'd never lived. When she realized how recognizable it was too late. The book was written, about to be published. What was she supposed to do? Demand changes? Withdraw permission retroactively? That would have destroyed their friendship just as effectively. So she stayed quiet, hoped it would be fine, and then dealt with the consequences when it wasn't. The accusation that she should have warned people shifts responsibility away from the person who created the situation. Cass made the choice to use recognizable details. Cass made the choice to create a fictional romance. Cass made the choice to publish without clarification. Those were authorial choices, and authors are responsible for the impact of their choices on real people they've used as material. So here's what you have to decide. Was she wrong for not warning people the character was based on her? Should she have anticipated that a recognizable character in a romance would create assumptions about her real life and proactively manage those assumptions? When someone uses you as inspiration for a character, are you responsible for clarifying what's real and what's fiction, or is that the author's job? And if giving permission to be a character means accepting all social consequences of that character's storyline, how informed does that permission need to be? Where do you draw the line between being someone's inspiration and being their material? Because she thought saying yes to one didn't mean signing up for the other. But apparently, it did.